I went to the hospital every day to take care of my husband after his accident. I fed him, adjusted his pillows, held his hand while he slept. The doctors said his broken leg would heal. They said he was lucky. On the third night, while he was unconscious and the ward was quiet, the head nurse checked his fore, leaned close to me, and slipped a folded piece of paper into my palm. Her voice was barely a breath. "Don't come again. Check the camera." My heart stopped. She didn't look at me again, didn't explain, just walked away like nothing had happened. That night, I watched the hospital security footage, and everything I believed about my marriage shattered in under 60 seconds. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and overboiled coffee. It clung to my clothes, my hair, my skin like proof of devotion. I arrived every morning at exactly 7:15 a.m., just as I had since Mark's accident. Same elevator, same third-floor corridor, same room, 312B. The nurses knew me by name. "Good morning, Mrs. Harris," they'd say. I smiled every time, because being recognized felt like something I'd earned. Mark lay in the bed by the window, his right leg suspended in a traction frame, wrapped in white plaster that made him look fragile, smaller than the man I married. The fall had been sudden. That's what he said. A workplace accident, a misstep on the stairs, a broken bone, nothing life-threatening, but enough to keep him here, enough to make me feel needed again. I brushed his hair back gently. "You slept through breakfast," I whispered. No response. He was heavily medicated, painkillers, muscle relaxants. The doctor said he drifted in and out, sometimes aware, sometimes not. I liked the quiet moments best. We couldn't talk. When he couldn't ask questions. Well, I could just be there. Mark and I had been married for 12 years. No children. Not yet, we always said. But the truth was quieter than that we kept missing each other. Schedules. Conversations. Intentions. I worked from home. He worked late. Somewhere along the way, us became maintenance instead of connection. This accident changed that. Or so I thought. Now he needed me. And I showed up. Every day, the third night was different. The ward was unusually still. No TVs murmuring, no carts rattling. The lights were dimmed, casting everything in that soft, artificial dusk hospitals love. Mark was asleep. Really asleep. His mouth slightly open, breathing slow and deep. I sat in the chair beside his bed, scrolling through my phone absently when Nurse Evelyn came in. She was the head nurse, mid-50s, calm eyes, silver hair always pulled back neatly. She'd been overseeing Mark's care since day one. "Good evening," she said softly. "Hi," I replied. "Did he need something?" She checked his foreline, adjusted the monitor, nodded to herself. "All stable," she said. Then she did something strange. She reached for my hand. At first, I thought she was just steadying herself. But then I felt it. Paper, folded small, pressed into my palm. Her fingers closed briefly around mine. Her voice dropped so low I almost didn't hear it. "Don't come again," she murmured. My heart skipped. "I what?" I whispered. She didn't answer. Instead, she straightened, stepped back, and said in her normal professional tone, "Visiting hours end in 20 minutes. Then she left. Just like that. I sat frozen. The paper burned against my skin. My first thought was that she'd made a mistake. Second thought, she was overworked. Third thought, maybe she was warning me about germs, rest, boundaries. But none of those explanations fit her eyes. They hadn't been frantic. They'd been apologetic. I unfolded the paper slowly. 3 words were written in blue ink. "Check the camera." No signature. No explanation. My throat tightened. What camera? The hallway ones? The room? My hand shook. I looked at Mark. Still sleeping. Peaceful. Innocent. I told myself not to be dramatic. But my body didn't listen. I left the hospital that night earlier than usual. For the first time, I didn't kiss his forehead goodbye. At home, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the note clenched in my fist. Mark and I shared passwords. Always had. Transparency, he'd said. I opened my laptop, logged into the hospital's patient portal, then hesitated. That wouldn't show cameras. I needed something else. Something only staff would normally access. Unless Mark had already accessed it himself. I checked his email. Scrolled. Then I saw it. A confirmation email from Hospital Security Services. Subject line. Footage access granted. Room 312B. Timestamp. 2 days ago. My stomach dropped. Hands trembling, I clicked. A secure link opened. Password required. I typed Mark's birthday. Denied. I tried our anniversary. Denied. Then, without knowing why, I typed the date he told me the accident happened. The screen loaded. A video player appeared. Angle. Ceiling corner of room 312B. Time stamped. I hit play, and in the first 30 seconds, I stopped breathing. Because the man in the bed, the man I was caring for, was not alone. I watched the video with the sound muted at first. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping that if I didn't hear anything, it wouldn't be real. The timestamp in the corner read 11:42 p.m. 2 nights ago, an hour after I'd gone home. The room was dark except for the soft glow of the monitors. Mark lay in bed, exactly as I'd left him, leg elevated, eyes closed. Then the door opened. A woman stepped inside. Not a nurse. No scrubs. No badge. No gloves. She wore a long coat, her hair loose around her shoulders. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight to Mark's bed like she'd done 100 times before. My pulse roared in my ears. I leaned closer to the screen. She reached out and touched his face. Gently, intimately. Mark stirred. Not groggy. Not confused. Awake. He opened his eyes and smiled. I slapped a hand over my mouth. Because that smile hadn't been for me in years. I unmuted the sound. The hospital's ambient noise filled the room. Soft beeps, distant footsteps. Then her voice. "Did you miss me?" she whispered. Mark chuckled. "Every second," he said. My stomach lurched. He shifted in bed, easily. Too easily for a man supposedly in agony. His leg remained immobilized, but his upper body moved with practiced comfort. She leaned down, kissed him. Not quick, not stolen. Slow, familiar. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "How long do I have?" she asked. 20 minutes, Mark replied. "They know my wife comes earlier." Wife. He said it casually, like a detail, like a scheduling inconvenience. The woman laughed softly. "She's devoted," she said. "I'll give her that." Mark smirked. "She always has been." My hand was shaking so badly, I had to pause the video. I stood up, paced the room, pressed my forehead against the wall. 12 years. 12 years reduced to a security feed and a man who wasn't even pretending to hurt. I forced myself back to the screen. Hit play. The woman sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle his leg. "Does it hurt?" she asked, touching the cast. Mark shrugged. "Not as much as they think." A beat. "I needed the time," he added. And the excuse. My vision blurred. "The fall was planned," she said. "Of course it was," he replied. "Insurance, medical leave, sympathy. And you can visit without suspicion." She smiled. "And she?" Mark sighed theatrically. "She's useful right now." Useful. The word sliced through me. "She's taking care of everything," he continued. "Meals, laundry, bills, the house." The woman tilted her head. "And when you're better?" Mark's eyes hardened. "She won't be part of that chapter." I felt bile rise in my throat. "So this ends soon," the woman said. "Yes," he replied. "Once the settlement clears." "What settlement?" Mark lowered his voice. "Malpractice. Negligence. We're building a case." I froze. "They think the stairs were faulty," he continued. "Hospital's already nervous." My lungs burned. "You're evil," the woman said softly, like it was a compliment. Mark smiled again. "I'm efficient." I slammed the laptop shut. The room spun. This wasn't just an affair. It was a performance, a calculated injury, a staged marriage, a plan that involved me playing the part of the loyal, oblivious wife. I thought of the nurses who smiled at me, the doctors who thanked me for my dedication. Nurse Evelyn. The paper. Don't come again. She knew, or suspected, or had seen something she couldn't legally say. I opened the laptop again, hand steadier now. Rewound. Watch the rest. The woman stood to leave. "I hate sneaking around," she said. "Not for much longer," Mark replied. "Once the money comes through, I'll file. For divorce." He nodded. "She'll be blindsided." He smiled. "She always is." The woman paused at the door. "What if she finds out?" Mark laughed. "She won't." The video ended. Black screen. Reflection of my face staring back at me. I didn't recognize the woman in it. She looked hollow. But behind the hollow, something sharp was forming. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I showered, dressed, and drove back to the hospital. Not to see Mark, to see Evelyn. She was at the nurse's station, reviewing charts. When she saw me, her expression barely changed, but her eyes softened. "I need to talk to you," I said quietly. She glanced around, then nodded toward the break room. Inside, the door closed softly behind us. "You saw it," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." She exhaled. "I shouldn't have done that," she admitted. "But I couldn't watch you keep showing up like that." "How long have you known?" I asked. "Not long," she said, "but long enough." She hesitated. "There's more," she added. My heart clenched. "What?" She lowered her voice. "He's not the first." I stared at her. "There were suspicions before," she said. "Other patients, other wives, similar patterns." My blood ran cold. "Patterns of what?" "Accidents that benefited someone," she said carefully. "Caregivers who didn't need as much care as they claimed." I thought of his easy movements, his laughter, the timing. "Why hasn't anyone stopped him?" I asked. She looked at me sadly. "Because no one ever proves it." I swallowed. "What happens if I stop coming?" I asked. Evelyn met my gaze. "He'll panic," she said, "and men like that make mistakes when their script changes." I nodded slowly. "Good." She raised an eyebrow. "What are you planning?" I smiled. "The same thing he did," I said softly, playing a role. That afternoon, I didn't go to room 312B. I didn't call. I didn't text. And at 2:06 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Mark. "Mark, everything okay? You're late." I stared at the screen, then typed my reply carefully. "Me. I'm not feeling well. I'll come tomorrow." 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Then, "Mark, take care of yourself." I laughed quietly, because now I knew. Every word was a lie. And the moment I stopped playing my part, his story would start to fall apart. Mark noticed my absence immediately. Of course he did. By noon, my phone buzzed again. "Mark, nurse says you didn't come this morning. Everything okay?" Concern. Perfectly calibrated. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I drove past the hospital, slowly, then kept going. For 12 years, I'd rearranged my life around his needs. Today, I chose something radical. Distance. At home, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Hospital footage paused on a frame I couldn't forget. Mark smiling at another woman in a bed I'd just fluffed hours earlier. I copied the video files. Backups. Cloud storage. Encrypted drive. Then I made a list. Insurance provider. Hospital legal department. Risk management. And, last, Mark's employer. I didn't contact any of them yet. Revenge rushed is revenge wasted. At 3:18 p.m., my phone rang. "Mark." I answered this time. "Hey," I said, letting my voice sound weak. "Where are you?" he asked immediately. "I woke up and you weren't here." "I told you," I said softly. "I'm not feeling well." A pause. "Do you want to call someone?" he asked. "No," I replied. "I just need rest." He exhaled, irritated, but quickly masked it. "You should still come tonight," he said. "I need you." There it was. Need. I almost laughed. "I'll see how I feel," I said. Another pause. Then, sharper. "You've never missed a day." "I know." Silence stretched. Then he said, "I miss you." The audacity of it made my hands tremble. "I'll come tomorrow," I said. "I promise." He relaxed audibly. "Okay," he said. "I love you." I ended the call before he could say anything else. That night, I barely slept. Not from fear, but anticipation. Men like Mark don't handle uncertainty well. They need control. They need predictability. And I just removed both. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital late. Very late. Visiting hours were already in full swing when I walked onto the ward. Nurse Evelyn saw me immediately. She didn't smile, but her eyes asked a question. I gave her the smallest nod. I entered room 312B quietly. Mark was awake. Too awake. His jaw tightened when he saw me. "Where were you yesterday?" he demanded. I paused at the door. "I was sick." He frowned. "You didn't sound sick." "I didn't want to worry you." The irony almost choked me. "You should have called," he snapped. "I texted," I replied calmly. "You said take care of yourself." He studied my face, looking for cracks. Sit, he said finally. I didn't. Instead, I walked to the window and stood there, arms crossed. I can't stay long, I said. That got his attention. What do you mean? I have things to take care of. His voice hardened. Like what? I turned to him slowly. Myself. Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Fear. You're acting strange, he said. I shrugged. Maybe I finally caught what you've had. He laughed nervously. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said lightly. I reached out and adjusted his pillow. One last familiar gesture. Then I leaned close. Who was she? I whispered. His body went rigid. What? The woman who visits you after I leave, I said softly. The one who kisses you goodnight. For half a second, he forgot to breathe. Then he recovered. Are you hallucinating? He snapped. You need rest. I smiled. I already rested, I said. That's why I'm seeing clearly now. His hands clenched the sheets. You're being paranoid. Am I? I asked. I straightened and picked up my bag. I won't be back tonight. What? His voice cracked. I'll check in tomorrow, I said. Maybe. His mask slipped thin, just a fraction. You can't just abandon me, he said. I looked at him. Really looked. I already did, I replied. I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard something crash, maybe the bedside tray, maybe his control. At the nurse's station, Evelyn met my eyes. He's asking for you, she murmured. I know, I said. And I'm letting him wait. She nodded once. Good. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed. Message after message. Mark, where are you going? Mark, this isn't funny. Mark, come back. I watched the doors close. Then I silenced the phone, because the man who thought he was directing every scene had just lost sight of the script. And the next act wouldn't be kind to liars. Mark called 9 times that night. I didn't answer any of them. By the 5th call, his messages stopped pretending to be loving. Mark, this isn't okay. Mark, you can't just disappear. Mark, I need to know where you are. Need. Control always wears that word when it's threatened. I put my phone face down and went to bed earlier than usual, not because I was tired, but because I wanted to wake up before he did. I wanted to stay ahead of him. At 6:40 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Mark. It was an unfamiliar number. I answered. Mrs. Harris? A man asked. This is Dr. Lewis from St. Anne's Hospital. Your husband requested we contact you. I sat up. Yes. There's been some agitation, he said carefully. He's upset you weren't here last night. I closed my eyes. I told him I was unwell. Yes, Dr. Lewis replied. He mentioned that. However, he's insisting on being discharged early. My heart skipped. That's not advisable, I said. Correct, the doctor replied, which is why I wanted to inform you. Did he say why? I asked. There was a pause. He claims he no longer feels safe here. I almost laughed. Almost. I see, I said calmly. I'll come by later today. Thank you, the doctor said. He'll be relieved. Relieved. That was a word Mark liked when things went his way. I arrived at the hospital just after lunch. The atmosphere on the ward felt tense. Nurses spoke in quieter voices. Doctors lingered longer in doorways. Something had shifted. Evelyn intercepted me before I reached Mark's room. He's been asking too many questions, she said under her breath. About schedules. About cameras. My pulse quickened. What kind of questions? Which angles cover which hours, she replied. Who reviews footage? How long it's stored? I swallowed. That's not subtle. No, she said. And it's not normal. I nodded. Has he asked about me? Yes, she said. Repeatedly. I took a breath. Good. She studied my face. You're calm, she said. I'm prepared, I corrected. When I entered room 312B, Mark was wide awake. Too awake. His eyes snapped to me immediately. There you are, he said sharply. Where have you been? I set my bag down slowly. I told you, I said. I wasn't feeling well. You didn't even call, he snapped. You didn't ask how I was, I replied. That stopped him. For a fraction of a second. Then he scoffed. Don't do this, he said. I'm injured. I glanced at his leg. Still suspended. Still untouched. You're injured, I agreed. Not helpless. His jaw tightened. You're acting strange, he said again. Distant. I'm paying attention, I replied. That's not the same thing. No, I said softly. It's worse. He stared at me. You're scaring me, he said. The lie was clumsy. I pulled a chair closer, but didn't sit. I spoke to a doctor this morning, I said. His eyes flickered. Which one? Does it matter? What did they say? He asked quickly. They said stress slows healing, I replied. And secrets don't help. Silence. He swallowed. You're accusing me of something, he said. I tilted my head. Am I? You're implying things, he snapped. You need to stop. I leaned forward slightly. You staged the fall, I said quietly. The room went very still. For a second, I thought he might deny it. Instead, he laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. You've lost your mind, he said. Have I? I asked. I slipped, he snapped. That's it. Then why weren't you in pain? I asked. Why did you move so easily? Why does the camera show you smiling when you thought no one was watching? His face drained of color. His voice cracked. You invaded my privacy? I smiled faintly. You invited me into the role, I said. I just stopped playing it blindly. His breathing sped up. This is dangerous, he said. You could get people in trouble. You already did, I replied. He slammed his hand against the bed rail. Stop. A nurse peeked in from the hallway. Everything okay in here? She asked. Yes, Mark said quickly, forcing a smile. Just a misunderstanding. She glanced at me. I met her gaze calmly. Everything's fine, I said. She hesitated, then left. Mark rounded on me. You need to keep quiet, he hissed. You don't know what you're messing with. I know exactly what I'm messing with, I said. A man who thought he was smarter than everyone else. His eyes went dark. If you ruin this, he said slowly, you ruin us. I straightened. There is no us. That landed. Hard. I left the room without another word. At the nurse's station, Evelyn was waiting. He just called security, she whispered. Asked about footage retention again. I exhaled. He's panicking. Yes, she said. And panic makes people reckless. I nodded. Which means it's time. For what? She asked. I looked down the hallway, toward Mark's room, for him to overplay his hand. That evening, I got the call I'd been expecting. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. Mrs. Harris, a man said. This is hospital risk management. We'd like to speak with you regarding your husband's case. I closed my eyes. Here it was. Yes, I said calmly. When? As soon as possible, he replied. There are inconsistencies. I smiled. I'll be there first thing tomorrow. After the call ended, my phone buzzed again. Mark, who are you talking to? I stared at the message, then typed my reply. Me. People who believe me. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No response followed. And for the first time since the accident, Mark was completely, terrifyingly silent. Hospital risk management didn't meet in patient rooms. They met in windowless offices with soundproof doors and neutral furniture, spaces designed to make emotions irrelevant. I arrived early, not because I was eager, because I wanted to look cooperative, prepared, harmless. The man who greeted me introduced himself as Mr. Collins. Gray suit, polite voice, eyes that missed nothing. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Harris, he said. Please have a seat. 2 other people joined us. A legal advisor, a clinical administrator, no doctors. That alone told me this wasn't about care. This meeting concerns your husband's accident and subsequent treatment, Collins began. Some irregularities have come to our attention. I nodded. I suspected as much. That caught their attention. Collins folded his hands. Your husband has raised concerns regarding staff conduct and surveillance procedures, he said. Specifically, he alleges improper monitoring. I kept my face neutral. He asked about the cameras, I said. The legal advisor glanced up. Extensively, she added. Yes, I replied. He was very curious. Collins studied me. And you, he asked. Have you noticed anything unusual? This was the moment. I didn't accuse. I didn't dramatize. I told the truth. I noticed my husband was far more mobile than expected, I said. I noticed visitors outside of approved hours. And I noticed that he seemed unsurprised by his condition. Silence. The administrator shifted in her seat. Did you observe anyone in particular? Collins asked. Yes, I said. A woman. Late at night. I slid a flash drive across the table. I accessed the security footage. I continued. Legally, through my husband's credentials. The legal advisor inhaled sharply. Collins didn't reach for the drive immediately. May I ask, he said carefully, why you didn't come to us sooner? I met his eyes. Because I wanted to see if my husband would tell the truth. And did he? No, I said simply. Collins nodded once. That aligns with what we're finding. They played the footage. Not the entire thing. Just enough. Mark smiling. The woman entering freely. The timestamps. The lack of distress. No commentary was needed. When the screen went dark, the room felt heavier. This footage contradicts the injury narrative, the administrator said quietly. Yes, Collins agreed, and raises questions about intent. Intent. That word changed everything. I want to be clear, Collins continued. We are not accusing your husband of wrongdoing at this time. I nodded. But, he added, we are initiating a formal internal investigation. I exhaled slowly. What happens now? I asked. Access restrictions, he said. Independent medical evaluation. Insurance. Notification. My pulse quickened, but my voice stayed steady. And my role? For now, he said, we ask that you continue as normal. I almost smiled. Normal, I echoed. Yes, he said. If your husband believes nothing has changed, he's more likely to reveal inconsistencies. I nodded. I could do that. When I returned to Mark's room, he was furious. Where were you? He snapped. I asked for you. I had a meeting, I replied calmly. With who? He demanded. You seat my bait down. Hospital administration. His face drained of color. What did you tell them? He asked. The truth. He laughed sharply. You're exaggerating, he said. You always do. I didn't exaggerate, I replied. I documented. His jaw tightened. This could ruin everything, he hissed. What everything? I asked. He stopped himself. Too late. You don't understand, he said quickly. There's money involved. There always is, I replied. He grabbed my wrist suddenly. Hard. You need to fix this, he said. You need to tell them you were confused. I didn't pull away. I raised my voice. Let go of me. A nurse appeared instantly. Is there a problem? She asked. Mark released me at once. No, he said smoothly. Just stress. I rubbed my wrist. Everything's fine, I said. The nurse hesitated, then left. Mark stared at me, breathing hard. You're making enemies, he said. I'm ending lies, I replied. He shook his head. You think they'll protect you? I leaned close. I think they already are. That night I stayed. I wanted him calm, complacent. He slept fitfully, twitched, muttered. At 11:53 p.m., he whispered in his sleep. They said it would work. I didn't move. They said she'd never know. I recorded the audio. Quietly, cleanly. Because lies don't just unravel. They confess when they think no one is listening. At 6:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. Security flagged another after-hours entry. Same woman. Different exit. I closed my eyes. He'd broken protocol again. While under scrutiny. While watched. He thought he was still directing the story. But he wasn't. And now, he just handed them the final proof they needed. The hospital changed overnight. Not in obvious ways. No alarms. No announcements. But in the quiet procedural shifts that meant authority had moved somewhere Mark could no longer reach. When I arrived the next morning, his door was no longer ajar. It was closed. A clipboard hung outside. Restricted access. Authorized staff only. My stomach tightened. Not with fear, but certainty. This was no longer just suspicion. This was containment. Evelyn met me near the elevators. They transferred him for evaluation, she said quietly. Different floor. Different team. Does he know? I asked. She nodded. He's furious. I exhaled. He should be. She hesitated, then added, security pulled last night's footage. I already knew what it would show, but hearing it still mattered. Same woman. I asked. Yes, Evelyn said. But this time, she didn't just visit. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? She accessed medication storage, Evelyn said. With his guidance. Cold crept in my chest. That's serious. Yes, Evelyn replied. And stupid. Men like Mark don't stop when they should. They double down. I wasn't allowed to see him immediately. Instead, I was escorted to another meeting room. Larger this time. More people. Risk management. Hospital legal. A uniformed officer. That was new. Mr. Collins was there again. His voice was flatter now. "We need to ask you some questions regarding potential insurance fraud and endangerment," he said. I nodded. "I'll answer whatever I can." They played more footage. The woman, this time clearly on camera, using a staff badge that wasn't hers. Mark whispering instructions, her hand hovering near a medication tray. "This was recorded at 11:57 p.m., Collins said, during restricted hours. "Is he conscious here?" the officer asked. "Yes," Collins replied. "Fully." The officer turned to me. "Did your husband ever express dissatisfaction with the hospital?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "but only when things didn't go his way." "And did he mention compensation?" The officer continued. "Yes," I said again. "Repeatedly." The officer nodded slowly. The detective's name was Ramos. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We're looking at multiple charges," he said over the phone. "Insurance fraud, conspiracy, reckless endangerment." I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. "Endangerment of whom?" I asked. "Patients," he replied. "Staff. Potentially you." That last word landed heavier than the rest. He intended for something to go wrong, Ramos continued. Something that would escalate his claim. My throat tightened. "How bad?" I asked. There was a pause. "Bad enough that we're grateful you stopped coming when you did." I closed my eyes. Evelyn's note flashed through my mind again. "Don't come again." She hadn't just been warning me about an affair. She'd been warning me about timing. The woman from the footage, Lila, was identified by morning. Not a nurse. Not a volunteer. No clearance of any kind. She was Mark's girlfriend, and she'd been using a stolen badge. Security footage showed her entering restricted areas 3 separate times. Always late. Always when Mark believed eyes were elsewhere. Ramos visited me in person that afternoon. He set a folder on the table between us. Photographs, printouts, transcripts. "Your husband orchestrated this," he said. "The fall, the timeline, the narrative." "Why?" I asked quietly. Ramos didn't hesitate. "Money, attention, control." I nodded. "And me?" He looked at me carefully. "You were leverage," he said. "And later, insurance." The room felt suddenly smaller. "He talked about me?" I asked. Ramos slid one more page forward. A transcript. Mark's voice, recorded in his hospital room. "She's perfect for it. She never questions anything. She'll cry when she needs to. And when this is over, she'll still stay." I stared at the words until they blurred. That recording, Ramos added, was captured when he didn't know audio was still live. I exhaled slowly. Was he planning to hurt me? I asked. Ramos didn't answer right away. He planned to let things happen. He said carefully, if they benefited him. That was worse. The hospital issued a statement the next day. Clinical. Vague. But enough. An internal investigation has uncovered serious violations of protocol involving a patient currently under care. The matter has been referred to law enforcement. People connected the dots. Mark's employer suspended him indefinitely. Evelyn visited me after a shift. Out of uniform, out of obligation. She brought no flowers, no comfort words, just honesty. "I'm being interviewed again tomorrow," she said. "For what?" I asked. "For everything," she replied. "What I saw, what I suspected, what I chose not to report earlier." I swallowed. "You did the right thing," I said. She shook her head. "I did the late thing." Then she looked at me. "You saved more people than you know." That sat with me. Mark tried to call. Twice. Then 5 times. I didn't answer. Finally, a voicemail came through, raw, hoarse, unraveling. "You think you're better than me?" he snarled. "You think you won?" I deleted it. The game he thought he was playing didn't have a winner anymore. Only consequences. 3 days later, Ramos called again. "They arrested Lila," he said. "For what?" "Accessory," he replied, "and for attempting to interfere with medical equipment." My breath caught. "Was anyone hurt?" "No," he said. "Because she was stopped." "Because I was stopped," I thought. "Mark's being charged," Ramos added. "But there's something else." My spine straightened. "What?" "He's claiming you knew." The words were sharp. "What do you mean?" "He's saying you were aware of the plan," Ramos said. "That you consented." I laughed once, short and incredulous. "That's ridiculous." "I know," Ramos said. but it means we need your full statement. On record. When? I asked. Tomorrow morning. I nodded. I'll be there. After the call ended, I sat very still. This was the last move. The one where men like Mark try to drag you down with them. If he couldn't control the ending, he'd poison it. That night, I pulled out everything. Emails, texts, voicemails, the footage, the audio. I organized it all, labeled it, prepared, not because I was afraid, but because truth deserves structure. I slept little. At dawn, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I stood differently, straighter. Still, when I arrived at the station, Ramos met me at the door. Ready? He asked. Yes, I said. We walked down a long hallway toward an interview room. Evelyn visited me after a shift. Out of uniform, out of obligation. She brought no flowers, no comfort words, just honesty. I'm being interviewed again tomorrow, she said. For what? I asked. For everything, she replied. What I saw, what I suspected, what I chose not to report earlier. I swallowed. You did the right thing, I said. She shook her head. I did the late thing. And she looked at me. You saved more people than you know. That sat with me. Mark tried to call. Twice. Then 5 times. I didn't answer. Finally, a voicemail came through, raw, hoarse, unraveling. You think you're better than me? He snarled. You think you won? I deleted it. The game he thought he was playing didn't have a winner anymore. Only consequences. 3 days later, Ramos called again. They arrested Lila, he said. For what? Accessory, he replied. And for attempting to interfere with medical equipment. My breath caught. Was anyone hurt? No, he said. Because she was stopped. Because I was stopped, I thought. Mark's being charged, Ramos added. But there's something else. My spine straightened. What? He's claiming you knew. The words were sharp. What do you mean? He's saying you were aware of the plan, Ramos said. That you consented. I laughed once, short and incredulous. That's ridiculous. I know, Ramos said. But it means we need your full statement. On record. When? I asked. Tomorrow morning. I nodded. I'll be there. After the call ended, I sat very still. This was the last move. The one where men like Mark try to drag you down with them. If he couldn't control the ending, he'd poison it. That night, I pulled out everything. Emails, texts, voicemails, the footage, the audio. I organized it all, labeled it, prepared. Not because I was afraid, but because truth deserves structure. I slept little. At dawn, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I stood differently, straighter. Still, when I arrived at the station, Ramos met me at the door. Ready? He asked. Yes, I said. We walked down a long hallway toward an interview room. As we passed holding cells, I caught a glimpse of Mark through the glass. Unshaven, pale, angry. He saw me. His eyes widened. For a moment, he looked like he might say something. Anything. Then the door closed between us. And for the first time since I'd known him, he had nothing left to say. The interview room was colder than it needed to be. Not uncomfortable, just impersonal. A table bolted to the floor. 2 chairs. A camera in the corner that didn't blink. Detective Ramos sat across from me. Another officer, Ms. Chun, positioned slightly to the side, fingers resting on a yellow legal pad. A recorder clicked on. State your name for the record, Ramos said. I did. Do you understand why you're here? Yes. To give a statement regarding your husband, Mark Harris, and events surrounding his hospitalization? Yes. He nodded once. Take your time, he said. Start wherever you need. I exhaled slowly, and then I told the truth. I told them about the accident as Mark described it, about my daily visits, my routine, my belief. I told them about the head nurse, the folded paper, the warning. Chin's pen paused briefly when I mentioned the note. I accessed the camera footage that same night, I continued, and I saw my husband with another woman. Awake, mobile, planning. I slid the folder across the table. Inside, timestamps, transcripts, screenshots, audio files. Organized. Clean. Ramos flipped through it without comment. When did you realize the injury might be staged? He asked. When I saw him move without pain, I said. And when I heard him talk about money. What kind of money? Insurance, I replied. Settlement. Compensation. Shin glanced up. Did he ever involve you directly? No, I said. He involved my image. The devoted wife. The witness he thought he controlled. Ramos leaned back. And when you stopped visiting? He panicked, I said. He broke protocol. He escalated. Did you fear for your safety? Shin asked. I thought about that carefully. Yes, I said, but not because he threatened me. Why then? Because he was willing to let harm happen, I replied, as long as it benefited him. Silence filled the room. That kind of answer doesn't invite follow-ups. They asked about the recordings. How I obtained them. When. Why I kept them. I didn't record to trap him, I said. I recorded to protect myself. Ramos nodded. That aligns with what we've seen. Then came the question I'd been bracing for. Mark claims, Ramos said carefully, that you were aware of the plan from the beginning. I didn't react. He says you agreed to play the grieving spouse to strengthen the claim. I almost smiled. Do you have proof of that? I asked. Ramos slid a single page toward me. A handwritten statement. Mark's. I read it once. Then again. It was desperate, rambling, contradictory. He'd written my name too many times. That's always a tell. I never consented, I said calmly. And if you compare timelines, you'll see his claim collapses. Shun tapped her pen. We did, she said. It does. I exhaled. Ramos leaned forward. There's one more thing, he said. We want to play you something. He pressed a button. Audio filled the room. Mark's voice, recorded during a monitor call from holding. She's smarter than I thought, but she still needs me. She always comes back. I listened without flinching. When it ended, Ramos watched my face. That was recorded after you stopped visiting, he said. I nodded. That's who he is when he thinks he's cornered. Ramos shut off the recorder. That statement alone undermines his entire defense. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief. Completion. They released me 2 hours later. No charges. No suspicion. Only quiet respect. As I walked out of the station, the sun felt brighter than it should have. Ramos walked me to the door. You did the right thing, he said. I know, I replied. He hesitated. If it helps, he added, he asked about you. Wanted to know if you'd come. I looked back at the building. Already did, I said. Just not for him. That afternoon, the formal charges were announced. Insurance fraud, conspiracy, reckless endangerment, unauthorized access to medical facilities. Lila accepted a plea deal within hours. Mark did not. He never thought he'd lose. Men like him rarely do, until they do. Evelyn called that evening. They removed his access completely, she said. No visitors without approval. Good, I replied. She paused. He asked for you. I closed my eyes. What did you say? That you were unavailable, she said. Indefinitely. I smiled. Thank you. That night, alone in my living room, I replayed one moment in my mind. The nurse's hand pressing that folded paper into mine. The quiet urgency. The compassion disguised as professionalism. One choice had changed everything. Not Mark's. Mine. Because the moment I checked the camera, I stopped being his wife in the story and became the witness. At 10:48 p.m., my phone buzzed. A notification. Court date scheduled. Defendant. Mark Harris. I set the phone down gently. I wasn't afraid of testifying. I wasn't afraid of seeing him again. Because whatever version of the man I'd loved, he no longer existed. And the one who remained would finally have to answer without a script. The courthouse didn't look like the movies. No grand staircases. No dramatic lighting. Just concrete, glass, and the quiet weight of consequence. I arrived early, not to make a statement, but to steady myself. The hallway outside the courtroom buzzed with low voices. Attorneys murmuring, clerks shuffling papers, reporters pretending not to stare. Mark's name was already on their lips. Hospital fraud case. Staged injury. Wife tipped off by nurse. None of them looked at me the way they used to. Not with pity, with understanding. Mark entered 10 minutes later, escorted. No suit. No confidence. He didn't look at me at first. When he finally did, there was something raw in his eyes. Not remorse, not love. Calculation. Even now, the judge called the room to order. The charges were read aloud. Each one landed like a gavel inside my chest. Insurance fraud. conspiracy to commit fraud, reckless endangerment, unauthorized access to medical facilities. Mark's attorney argued first. Of course he did, but he painted Mark as confused, over-medicated, misunderstood. He suggested stress. He suggested miscommunication. Then, inevitably, he suggested me. The defendant's wife, he said smoothly, had access to his accounts, his devices, and the footage in question. Her interpretation cannot be considered unbiased. I felt the room shift. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed," she said. The prosecution didn't raise their voice. They didn't need to. They showed the footage, the timestamps, the entries, the exits. They played the audio. Mark's voice, clear, unmistakable. They called Evelyn. She testified calmly about protocols, about concerns, about the night she made a choice. Her hands didn't shake. Then they called me. I stood, walked to the witness stand, swore the oath. Saturday, I didn't look at Mark. I looked at the judge, and I told the truth. I spoke about routines, about trust, about how easy it is to be loyal when you believe in someone. I spoke about the note, the camera, the moment the story cracked. The prosecutor asked one final question. "Mrs. Harris," he said, "why did you stop visiting your husband?" I didn't hesitate, because I realized my presence made his lie possible. The room went very still. Mark's attorney tried once more. "Isn't it true," he asked, "that you were angry when you discovered the affair?" "Yes," I said. "And isn't it possible," he pressed, "that this anger influenced your interpretation?" I met his gaze. "Anger didn't alter the footage," I said. "It didn't move his body. It didn't open restricted doors." He paused, then sat down. The judge didn't rule that day. Courts rarely do, but when she spoke, her words were clear. "The evidence presented suggests not only intent," she said, "but premeditation." Mark's shoulders sagged. The bailiff moved closer. The next steps were set. Trial dates, motions, restrictions. The machinery of accountability turned on. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. Microphones raised. Questions sharpened. I didn't stop. I didn't need to, because the truth had already spoken. That night, I sat at home and finally cried. Not loudly, not desperately, just enough to release what I'd been carrying. The marriage, the illusion, the woman I'd been when I thought love meant endurance. I wiped my face and stood. Tomorrow would bring more. But tonight, I slept knowing the story no longer belonged to him. The waiting is what surprised me most. Not the fear, not the memories, the waiting. Court schedules stretch time until it loses meaning. Weeks blurred in emotions, continuances, sealed documents, and careful silence. Mark remained in custody due to the severity of the charges and the risk assessment. Lila finalized her plea deal and disappeared from the narrative almost overnight. And me? I went back to living. That felt like the most radical act of all. I returned to work part-time first. Emails, meetings, normalcy. People were careful around me, like grief might be contagious. I let them be. They didn't need to understand what I'd survived, only that I had. Evelyn checked in occasionally. Always brief, always professional, but there was warmth now. "You look lighter," she said during one visit. "I am," I replied. "I stopped carrying what wasn't mine." She smiled. "That's rare." Mark requested to see me 3 weeks before trial. His attorney contacted mine. One conversation, they said, "Closure." I laughed when my lawyer told me. "He doesn't want closure," I said. "He wants influence." "Correct," my lawyer replied. "But it could help the court see you as cooperative." I considered it. Not for him. For myself. 5 minutes, I said, with supervision. The visitation room was smaller than I expected. No glass wall, just a table, 2 chairs. Mark was already seated when I entered. He looked thinner, sharper, like someone who'd burned through adrenaline and found nothing underneath. He stood when he saw me. "Hey," he said quietly. I didn't sit right away. "What do you want?" I asked. He swallowed. "I just needed to see you." I sat. 5 minutes. He clasped his hands together, knuckles white. "They're twisting things," he said. "You know that." "No," I replied. "They're documenting them." He winced. "I never meant for it to go this far." "You meant for it to benefit you," I said. That was enough. Silence stretched. You could still help me, he said finally. I tilted my head. How? By reminding them I'm human, he said, that I made mistakes. I studied him. You didn't make mistakes, I said calmly. You made plans. His jaw tightened. I loved you, he said suddenly. The words felt old, expired. You loved what I gave you, I replied. And you hated what I cost. He leaned forward. If I go to prison, you will, I said. That stopped him. You don't know that, he snapped. I do, I replied. Because this isn't about revenge. He stared at me. This is about evidence. He slumped back in his chair. I thought you'd be weaker, he admitted. When you found out, I smiled faintly. You confused kindness with weakness, I said. A lot of people do. The guard cleared his throat. Time. Mark stood. I still think about you, he said. I don't, I replied. And that was the truth. The trial lasted 8 days. I attended 2. The rest, I followed through transcripts. The evidence was overwhelming. Footage, records, expert testimony. His defense collapsed under its own contradictions. When the verdict came, I was at home. My lawyer called. Guilty on all counts, she said. I closed my eyes. Not in relief. In release. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month. I didn't attend. I wrote a victim impact statement instead. Short, clear. I spoke about trust, about risk, about the danger of unchecked entitlement. I didn't mention love, because love wasn't the crime. Control was. On the day Mark was sentenced, I took the afternoon off. I went to a park near my apartment, sat on a bench, watched children play. Life continued without apology. My phone buzzed once. Sentenced 12 years. I nodded. That felt proportional. That evening, I cooked dinner for myself. Nothing fancy, just enough. As I ate, I thought about the woman I'd been when I walked into that hospital believing devotion was protection. And I felt something close to gratitude. Because if Evelyn hadn't slipped that paper into my hand, if I hadn't checked the camera, if I hadn't listened, I might still be sitting at his bedside, loving a lie. The last message I ever received about Mark came months later. A mutual acquaintance. He keeps asking about you. I didn't respond. Because some stories don't deserve epilogues. They deserve silence and peace. And a woman who finally understands that love never requires blindness. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the empty kind, the kind that echoes. This was different. This was mine. No hospital monitors. No ringing phones. No footsteps outside a door that made my stomach tighten. Just morning light slipping through the blinds of my apartment and the steady sound of my own breathing. 4 months after the verdict, I'd lived braced for impact, waiting for something else to go wrong, for another shoe to drop. But nothing did. The world didn't end. It continued. And slowly, so did I. I changed routines. Small things at first. I took a different route to work. I stopped checking my phone every hour. I let emails sit unanswered overnight. At the grocery store, I lingered instead of rushing. At home, I cooked real meals again, ones that took time, that required attention. Care without obligation. That was new. Therapy helped. Not because it erased what happened, but because it gave language to the things I'd never named before. Hypervigilance. Coercive control. Learned compliance. Words that explained why I'd been such a good wife to the wrong man. Evelyn and I met for coffee once. Not as nurse and spouse. As 2 women who'd stood at the edge of something dangerous and chosen differently. You know, she said, stirring her cup, I still think about that night. So do I admitted. She smiled faintly. I almost didn't give you the note. I looked up sharply. What made you do it? She thought for a moment. I saw the way you tucked the blanket around him, she said. Like he was precious. My throat tightened. And I realized, she continued, that if I stayed silent, I'd be complicit. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You saved my life, I said. She shook her head. No, she replied. You saved your own. I just pointed. Time passed. The case faded from headlines. Mark's name became something people avoided rather than discussed. That anonymity felt like justice too. One afternoon, I received a letter from the hospital. Formal, careful. They were implementing new safeguards, revising visitor protocols, enhancing surveillance oversight. At the bottom was a line that made me pause. Your cooperation contributed significantly to these changes. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Just when life felt almost normal again, the email arrived. From a law firm I didn't recognize. Subject line, Estate Inquiry, Harris. My pulse quickened despite myself. I opened it. The message was brief. Mark's mother had passed away suddenly. There was a dispute regarding next of kin. As his legal spouse at the time of hospitalization, they required clarification. I stared at the screen. I hadn't thought about his family in months. Hadn't wanted to. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. Her reply came quickly. You are not obligated to engage, but this could reopen limited contact. I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding. The past has a way of testing boundaries you think you've mastered. That night, I dreamed of the hospital again. But this time, I wasn't sitting at his bedside. I was standing in the hallway, watching myself walk away. I woke with my heart racing, then steadied, because even dreams were starting to understand. The next day, I met my lawyer. We reviewed documents, dates, definitions, limits. You could decline involvement entirely, she said. I know, I replied. But, she prompted gently. But I want it closed properly, I said. Not avoided. She nodded. That's strength, she said. Not obligation. I sent one response. Professional. Brief. Please direct all inquiries through counsel. I will not engage personally. I hit send and waited. 3 days later, the phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at it for a long moment, then answered. Yes. A man's voice, older, strained. This is Daniel Harris, he said. Mark's father. My chest tightened, but I stayed calm. How can I help you? I asked. A pause. I know you don't owe us anything, he said. But there are matters that need settling. And Mark, he keeps asking for you. There it was. The echo. I'm not available, I said evenly. I understand, he replied. But before everything ends, there's something you should know. I closed my eyes. What? I asked. His voice dropped. The accident, he said. It wasn't the first plan. My breath caught. What do you mean? Another pause. He'd been practicing, Daniel continued. For years. The line went silent. And I realized, just when I thought I had the whole story, the past might still be holding one final truth that I didn't answer Daniel Harris right away. I couldn't. The words he'd been practicing echoed too loudly in my head, colliding with memories I'd never quite trusted, but had never questioned either. I'll call you back, I said finally. He didn't argue. I'll be here, he replied. I owe you that. After the call ended, I sat very still. Mark hadn't just staged an accident. He'd refined a method, and that realization changed the shape of everything. I went back through our marriage with new eyes. Not emotionally, strategically. The back injury 6 years ago. The mysterious allergic reaction at a conference. The unexplained fall in the garage. Each incident had brought sympathy. Time off. Money. Not large sums, but enough. Patterns hide best when they escalate slowly. I met Daniel Harris 2 days later in a quiet cafe. He looked exhausted in the way only parents of dangerous children do. Older than his years, hollowed by regret. I should have spoken sooner, he said after we Saturday, but I kept believing he'd grow out of it. Out of what? I asked. Daniel swallowed. Testing boundaries, he said, seeing what pain could buy. My hands clenched around my cup. He used to fake injuries as a teenager, Daniel continued. Minor things. Sprains. Concussions. Always right before exams. Always when consequences loom. And you believed him, I said. I wanted to, Daniel replied. There it was. The same mistake I'd made. He planned the hospital incident for over a year, Daniel said quietly. I found notes after his arrest. My heart pounded. What kind of notes? Timelines. Payout estimates. Legal language he didn't understand but copied. I exhaled sharply. And me? I asked. Daniel met my eyes. You were his stabilizer, he said. He thought as long as you stayed calm, everything else would follow. The words felt heavy, but clarifying. I wasn't his victim, I said slowly. No, Daniel replied. You were his alibi. The meeting didn't last long after that. There was nothing else to say. Daniel apologized again, unnecessary but sincere. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I don't offer it lightly, I replied. But I don't carry blame that isn't mine. He nodded. When I left the cafe, the air felt sharper, cleaner, like something rotten had finally been exposed. That night, I wrote everything down. Not for court, for myself. Because truth doesn't settle until it's placed somewhere solid. The estate matter resolved quietly. Mark inherited nothing he could access. His legal entanglements consumed what little remained. The past devoured itself. Months later, I stood in front of a group of nurses and hospital administrators. I hadn't planned to speak publicly, but Evelyn had asked. Tell them what noticing looks like, she said. So I did. I talked about devotion being exploited. I didn't name Mark. He didn't deserve the legacy. When the talk ended, a young nurse approached me. I saw something once, she said nervously, but I wasn't sure. I smiled gently. Being unsure is where courage starts, I said. On the anniversary of the night, Evelyn slipped me the note. I went back to the hospital. Not inside, just the parking lot. I sat in my car for a while. Then I drove away. Some places don't need revisiting to be released. I no longer wake up braced. I no longer scan rooms for exits. The quiet I live in now is earned. Not because the danger disappeared, but because I learned to listen when something whispered wrong. The last thing Mark ever gave me wasn't trauma. It was proof. Proof that intuition is intelligence. That silence can be broken. That one choice can collapse an entire lie. And when the truth finally stood, it didn't need revenge. It needed witnesses. I was one. And now, I don't remember the exact day Mark stopped occupying space in my mind. There was no announcement, no dramatic realization. Just a morning when I woke up and noticed the quiet didn't feel fragile anymore. It felt permanent. Life didn't become extraordinary after everything ended. It became honest. I trusted my instincts again. I trusted my silence. I trusted the way my body reacted before my mind caught up. That trust was the real recovery. Sometimes people still ask how I survived it. The lies, the manipulation, the realization that love had been used as camouflage. I tell them the truth. I listen when something felt wrong, I say, and I didn't ignore the warning. That was the difference. Not strength, not revenge. Attention. The hospital remains a building I pass but never enter. Not because it haunts me, because it taught me something important. Danger doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it whispers, waits, and counts on politeness. And safety? Safety often arrives disguised as a folded piece of paper and the courage to look. I never visited Mark again. Not in prison. Not in memory. He exists now only as a lesson I no longer need to revisit. Some endings don't require forgiveness. They require distance. When I think of Evelyn, I think of this. One woman noticing. One woman choosing to act. One moment changing everything. That's how lies collapse. Not with explosions, but with witnesses. I don't flinch at sirens anymore. I don't replay conversations in my head. I don't wonder what I missed. Because I didn't miss it. I caught it, and I walked away. The last thing I learned is simple, and I carry it quietly. Love does not ask you to disappear. Truth does not fear being seen. And survival is not luck, it's listening. I listened, and I lived.